was Franklin Roosevelt. And that liberal totalitarians, as they called them, were seeking to suppress dissent in the United States. And what boggled my mind, I found this in the congressional record, May 16th, 1945. Congressman from Wisconsin named Frank Bateman Keefe, who no one's ever heard of, and denounces his Jewish colleague, Adolph J. Sabath from Illinois. For what? Sabath talked about George Van Horn Mosley and other pre-war fascists who he said were free to keep practicing their doctrines after World War II. And he said it was a shame. And he referenced a fact sheet that the War Department had distributed to American GIs heading to Europe. And this is a basic document. There's nothing dangerous or subversive about it. It simply tried to explain to the soldiers that a fascist wouldn't necessarily reveal it then when you're over in Europe.
Yeah.
What is Bateman Keefe saying?
I've read much of that document on this podcast. As a matter of fact, it's fascinating. And
Bateman Keefe denounces Sabath. He says this is a dangerous document. You're trying to suppress free speech in the United States, and you liberals are the true totalitarians. Now, the other fascinating thing is that Senator Joseph McCarthy, I point out in the book, there's a big wave. They set the stage for Holocaust revisionism. Yeah. Regnery Press opens up in 1948-49 with several books arguing that it was the United States that committed war crimes that were as bad or worse than anything the Nazis did. And that Regnery also published books saying we should have allied. Essentially, we should have allied with Nazi Germany. Our big mistake was to let Stalin take over Eastern Europe. Joseph McCarthy takes this up. He defends SS soldiers who had been tried and convicted after World War II in trials in Germany by the Pentagon. McCarthy says, no, these were innocent GI Joes. Who are we to judge these German soldiers? Many of them were SS members. And he says, would you trust a man with the name Rosenfeld if he was the lawyer interrogating you? I mean, it went on like this, completely specious, but a forerunner of what McCarthy would do in the 1950s.
It's amazing to me how quickly that comes in. I mean, really, it never went away. It was just kind of like kept at bay, given the immediate period of the war. But I remember. I've seen it a number of times, but the film The Best Years of Our Lives, there's this wonderful scene in which one of the protagonists, played by Dana Andrews, who was a returning war veteran, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, gets into a conversation because he's gotten a job as a soda jerk, and he's talking to this guy who has a pen, and he's reading the headlines, and he's just like, he's like so frustrated, he said, well, we fought the wrong people, and guys like you had to suffer for it. And he gets into this big confrontation, and he's saying a lot of these same things that people were saying in 1945 and 46 on the far right, that we shouldn't have fought the Germans, we should have been, fighting the Russians instead, and all those the soldiers, American soldiers, died for nothing, and he punches him, and he falls into the display case, and he quits his job because he says it's not worth working that job if he has to talk with guys like that. And that sort of encapsulates to me what you are talking about. It was right there, and that evolved into like the virulent strain of authoritarian supporters and birchers that I think that have continued more underground, but eventually like resurfaced in a big way with Donald Trump once we get to our own era.
Absolutely right. In fact, I begin the chapter about post-war isolationism with that very scene.
Yeah,
because I say, unfortunately, it wasn't that easy in real life to deliver a knockout blow to these people.
True. Very true. Yeah, exactly. They've been there for a long time in various different forms. What do you think it was about those moments in 2015 and 2016 that made that kind of dictator worship permissible again in the form of Donald Trump. And I hate to bring it up, but you had a little bit of a personal role in that yourself.
Well, I did introduce Trump for a speech.
That's what I mean. I don't mean to ascribe any of the pro-dictator sentiments to you, but you did have a role in introducing Trump to the public in a way.
I found it interesting because I did not find him impressive at all. And I don't understand why people cower before this man.
Yeah.
He is not impressive in the flesh.
He's a weird character. I mean, I'm far from the first person to say this, but he's just an odd human being with strange mannerisms. And if you were trying to invent a dictator or an authoritarian or an aspiring authoritarian in your head, like, you would not associate that with any of these weird, quirky, sort of like catty, like online, like grievance milking sort of things in which he is involved. It's such a bizarre match, but it really is. In a way, it distracts us from the real danger that he does pose to our form of government.
Definitely. He is a buffoon, but that has never prevented anyone from becoming a dictator.
True enough.
In fact, someone pointed out that, if you were riding on a subway, you would move the seat away if you were next to Adolf Hitler.
Right.
I mean, smelly breath, a bizarre character. But these guys are, in a sense, brand salesmen. And all that Trump is simply peddling, this is the first product that he's peddled that's really been successful on a national level. He's the first politician to mainstream far-right thinking. And that is partly why he's so revered. He gives a permission slip to his followers to act on their most base impulses.
It's fascinating to me to see this arrive at a time where the American presidency is more powerful than it's ever been. Because over the course of the second half of the 20th century and into the 21st, we've seen an expansion of executive power. What role do you think that plays in the projection of dictatorial powers and the admiration of dictators themselves? Do you think there's a relationship there?
The presidency does not represent what the founding fathers envisioned.
Yeah.
It's really with Theodore Roosevelt that it starts to shift and it becomes a celebrity post. Now, not every president used it in that manner, but the latent capabilities were there. The presidency has morphed. It was never supposed to dominate Congress as it does now. So we have an imperial presidency, as Arthur Schlesinger Jr. pointed out. And depending on which party is in power, people like it. They want Joe Biden to issue executive orders, to do an end run around Congress. And Congress itself is often happy with that situation because they don't want to take a stand on issues. So you have someone like Trump, boy, the jet engine is revved up, it's fueled, it's ready to take off.
In polling that I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen as well, a significant number of people in the Republican Party are very happy with a dictator. People with authoritarian powers. Trump himself has said, he wishes he could be dictator for one day. I'm not sure that he would necessarily limit it to that. But what do you think that the exposure to Donald Trump as a president and are openly discussing for the first time it seems like seriously in mainstream discussions, having actual dictatorial powers in our executive, what do you think that means for the way in which we perceive that moving forward, not only in this election, but in future elections and in the way we select the type of person that should be the leader of our country?
Well, if we quash it, it can be a healthy development that immunizes us against it in the future. I don't think we can eliminate this threat. I think we can suppress it. The danger is, unless Trump is repudiated decisively, even if it's a narrow election, I don't know if that's enough. He's sort of shown his successors, and they may try to do a better version of it.
Yeah.
So we're really not out of the woods in that scenario. American democracy is not as vibrant as many people assumed. Americans have told themselves a fairy tale about their history and about their political system, which, when you compare it with that of some other countries, it's not that well functioning a democracy.
Yeah. Yeah, I was talking to someone just this morning about the fact that, as happens so often in our country, it looks like the Republicans are going to are going to lose control of the House of Representatives if everything goes as one would anticipate, and that the Democrats are going to lose control of the Senate. So regardless of whether Biden is able to pull off a second term or not, we're going to be at loggerheads, and there's not really going to get much done. And it seems like that is almost intrinsic in the project. It seems like part of the founding fathers' vision was a certain amount of inaction, and that if as a function, if we really hope to proceed as a functioning democracy, some serious structural changes are going to be needed in the system, because certainly at this point, based on where we are culturally and politically, and given the core system that we have, I can't envision anything getting done. I mean, it might have been true that you could do that, 50 or 60 years ago, but things have shifted in a way that it doesn't seem possible, and we don't seem to have a functioning democracy. And I think, unfortunately, that drives people more into the camp of saying, "Oh, well, we got to have someone who can just push through that system with enormous powers."
Right, but that if the founding fathers didn't envision political parties, and in fact were hostile to them.
That's quite true.
And now we have an extreme version of political parties, well, particularly in the Republican Party, which is now is really going to extra parliamentary action.
Yeah.
So I'm not optimistic right now. We have an anti-majoritarian system. You have a stacked Supreme Court. We have the Electoral College. It has ground to a halt. And what we have is to invoke Schlesinger again, is the crisis of the old order. So something new has to emerge from this crisis. We are heading, some people compare it to the Civil War. Another analogy maybe it is, heading towards, we're not in a Great Depression. In fact, we're doing well economically, but maybe we are heading to some kind of political crash like we did in 1932.
Yeah. And what great beast slouches towards Washington to be born, to paraphrase William Butler Yeats. Who knows what's going to come out of this? I hope it's positive, but there's not a whole lot on the horizon that would tend towards indicating that. So on that positive note, let us cast forward an aspiration towards something better, because we need something on the horizon besides what we have now, because it's not looking positive in terms of maintaining our system and our democracy as we have known it in our lives. Jacob Heilbrunn, he is the author of America Last, The Right's Century-Long Romance with Foreign Dictators. Jacob, thank you so much for being with us today on Facepalm America.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to Facepalm America today. I want to ask you, if you could, to share this episode on your social media. It helps expand the folks who listen to us